Hey Buckaroos, is everybody up for an extra lesson, a bonus one if you will? I think we'll do that this lesson. It's going to be a short one, really short actually. I've only done this one other time before, which is basically go through someone else's blog, and because I think it's good for you to actually know what they're saying. I did one with Sean Ross's blog a while back, maybe about a year ago. And what he was doing is comparing the repeat factors, the turnover songs of top 40 radio stations in the United States and how fast they are, versus the ones in the UK, which are definitely slower. I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it was something like hour and a half versus 3.5 hours, something along that line, which is a pretty big jump there from one to the other. So, and that was good to know for specifics of things. Today I'm going to go through a blog that Fred Jacobs did today, and it's really interesting because it's about Paul McCartney and how Paul McCartney thinks about doing his concerts and pleasing his audience that's going to come to see him do his concerts. And it is really close to what you should be thinking, because this is a think piece, the other one was a nuts and bolts piece, of how you should be thinking about your radio station and pleasing your audience, pleasing the listeners, and the parallels between what McCartney is talking about for concerts and actually being a good PD, they're staggering actually. They're really pretty much dead on. So let's go to the computer and we'll go through that. This is Fred's blog, and this is where all the blog stuff is. And there's a whole bunch of blogs, and all you'd have to do is just hit up here, blogs, and you'll see a ton of them. This is the one that we want to talk about though, the one with Paul McCartney. And I'm going to blow this up so we can get down into this section. But essentially what this is Fred evidently a few years ago did this same article that he saw in August of 2016, and it was the parallels that the way Paul McCartney being interviewed by a New York Times reporter, how much he was talking about how close what he thinks about a concert and the way radio programming is. So let me blow this up just a little bit and so everybody can see it a lot easier. And okay, this is about as far as it's going to go. I'll have to do the rest with the video software. So Fred starts out here where it's McCartney addressing the balancing act of appealing to both fanatics and casual fans. So basically, Cume and P1s, people who come in and out and the people who love your radio station. So in this, he puts himself in the shoes of a fan and the role of new music and deep tracks versus proven gold. In other words, the stuff that, they're the big hits, and then there's the other songs. And then there's some key questions followed, of course, by Paul's responses. So let's go through these, all right? And then Fred gives a commentary in here too. So here's the first question. At your MetLife concert, Paul, there was a fan sitting in front of you, has seen you over 100 times. Wow, that dude must have a lot of money to be doing that. Anyway, how do you please both him and a 20-year-old seeing you for the very first time? McCartney, what I really do for both of them is try to do a show that I would like to go and see. So first I sit down and think, if I was going to go see this guy, I want him to do this, and he can't leave out that, and I really hope he does this. So those songs are the starting point, and then we start to kick things around in rehearsal. And my band, they'll sometimes suggest an idea, and I'll hear something on the radio and I'll think, hey, we should do that. So in essence, this is Fred now, which is, absolutely right. So in essence, he's building his show much the same way a great PD designs a radio station. Of course, he's going to have to satisfy those super P1s who give you the most quarter hours, but you also have to make sure the occasional concert goer or the Cume person coming in, they can appreciate the show as well. You're not just doing the same old, and they come in and go, there's nothing new here, let me bail out. When Paul talks about those core songs that he simply has to play, essentially, those are his powers. That's the power gold, and he locks them in. I wouldn't at all be surprised if he builds in Separation in his set list too, to be sure he hooks the crowd in at just the right times. I mean, think about that for a second. All we've talked about in these lessons about separation and setting up clocks and things like that, here you have a world-renowned artist probably thinking the same way. In this way, he moves the audience from a smash hit to an album track or a secondary song, and then he goes back to power. And the collaboration with his team is an essential element too. Lastly, Paul would probably be a pretty smart consultant because he combines multiple sources of input, including listening to which Beatles, Wings, and his solo songs are playing on the radio today. In other words, he's not going to be stuck in the past. He's going to go, what's going on here? What should I change? Should I change my thinking or not? Pretty cool. Let's go to the second question that the New York Times person is asking. Bob Dylan is also on tour now, playing almost exclusively new songs. Can you imagine doing that, Paul? McCartney. Well, I've thought about that a lot. I'm sure he has. I think most artists do. Theoretically, the philosophy is good because, well, you're not playing songs you've played a lot. But my concern is for the audience. I remember when I went to concerts, particularly as a kid, it was a lot of money you had to save up. Think about it now. Like right now, think about the Springsteen, how much those cost, okay? Bear that baby in mind. So I imagine myself going to my show. Would I like to hear him play all new songs? No, I wouldn't want to do that. I would do a smaller gig and advertise that fact up front. That's significant. Smaller gig is significant, but advertising that fact up front. I'd probably call the tour Deep Cuts or something. I mean, that's really pretty radio stuff that's coming out of McCartney's mouth here. And the reason I'd call it Deep Cuts is so you knew it was going to be just really deep cuts that only the aficionados would know. I think if I did that, it'd be quite fun to do. How many programmers have you met, or how many people that are jocks that want to be programmers that are sort of new to the game, and you want to go, I'm going to do all new songs. I'm not going to be doing the same stuff over and over and over again. Or we've exposed these songs to a whole bunch of people. I actually had a conversation with an alternative station PD once, and I was shocked out of my mind that the person said this. I was like, wow, dude, you have no clue what you're talking about. We were talking about U2, and this was, way back. This was right at the end of the 80s, somewhere in there. And they wouldn't play a U2 song. And I go, well, how come you don't play U2 songs? They're pretty strong right now. Well, we exposed U2 to the audience. We were the first stations to play U2 in the market. We played them for a couple years before anybody else would play U2. But then other stations now, they're playing U2, so we don't play U2 anymore. And I was like, well, hold on a second. Let me get this straight. So if you were Chrysler and you invented the minivan, and you're making billions of dollars on the minivan, and all of a sudden Ford starts making a minivan, you're going to stop your production line and stop making minivans? Is that basically what you're saying? And I got that look of, oh, I don't know how to answer that. So anyway, there's certainly a place for new songs, but you can't go crazy with them. You just can't, because you got to play, what's expected too. Fred's response, some great advice there. First and foremost, think about the content from the audience's point of view. That's a big one. What are they thinking and expecting? How can programming best match up with their expectations, not yours? McCartney's comment about depth tracks or new music speaks to some of the same dilemmas many programmers face. Paul's suggestion, let the deep stuff play in a weekend specialty show where you can glean aesthetic credit during a less critical day part, or let the other guy, the other station, play the obscure tracks. For Sir Paul and his fans, it's a steady diet of hits. Hits wins. And lastly, not an unkind word toward a fellow icon. Even if he may patently disagree with Dylan's tour design, it is unthinkable Paul would actually play a concert exclusively comprised of new and or deep track songs. He's too much of the crowd pleaser for that, and he knows his audience. And what do you want to be with a radio station? Do you want to be eclectic and kind of weird and out on the side? No, you want to be an audience pleaser with big numbers, because if you don't, you know what happens to you as the PD? You get blown out. That's it. The next station that you're going to be working at is an SO. Next question from New York Times. It's interesting how much you think about the audience being entertained or disappointed. McCartney. Well, having been one and having spent what for me was a lot of money, and that was very much the Beatles' philosophy. If you think about our singles, there was an A and a B side, just like pretty much all other 45s at the time. Normally, people put a bit of rubbish on the B side, but the Beatles' B sides are really always good. We used to call it value for money, because we had all recently been those teenagers that we were now appealing to. Here's Fred. Paul's wisdom is spot on here, because every moment, every impression counts. People don't just form opinions about your station from your morning show or your veteran midday talent. What happens at night, on weekends, and during the so-called off times all contribute to the overall brand image and building that sense of loyalty. When someone tunes in your radio station, they give you the gift of their time. It has value. Oh man, that is so true. Time has value. I actually believe that time is the currency of radio at the moment. If you get their time, you get everything else. Anyway, It has value, and that's something Paul instinctively understands. It's also important to retain those fan feelings. Many radio people haven't paid for a concert ticket in years and may not even be aware of just how much they cost. A sense of empathy for fans is a critical piece that goes into being a great PD. You want to put yourself in the fan, in the listener's shoes. Programming a station from the point of view of the listener provides a great UX or user experience. It's what separates the good brand managers from the great ones. By putting himself in the shoes of his fans, Paul delivers a great show. As an aside, see this section right here? All things contribute to the overall brand image and building that sense of loyalty of a radio station. When I was a kid and I had just gotten into radio, I was in radio just a couple months. I was lucky enough to go down to New York City and sat in on the show for 4 hours while he was doing a show, Dan Ingram at WABC. Now, a lot of you younger people won't know who he was. Just suffice to say, he was an unbelievably awesome jock. He was like one of a kind. If you're older, you will know who Dan Ingram is. And in that, when we're sitting there, it was me and a friend of mine, we went down. We just got talking, and Ingram would talk to us. And at one point, I remember he said something, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I'm only a kid. I think at the time I was like maybe, 18 years old. What he said was, we were talking somehow about the radio station and image. He goes, no, I'm not the image of the radio station. I'm not part of it. I believe, this is Ingram speaking, I believe that nowadays the image of a radio station comes from the night person. Our image is Cousin Brucey. Cousin Brucey sets the image for our radio station. And he was an unbelievably great jock with huge ratings. And the midday people had huge ratings. And the morning person had huge ratings, as did Cousin Brucey at night. But he believed, and therefore I think, somebody must have talked about that inside the radio station, like probably the PD and other people. He believed, and probably the people inside believed, that the image of that radio station came from the night show, not from any other show. Bear that baby in mind. Last question, New York Times. In times of chaos, fans gravitate to the comfort and perspective of a song like Let It Be. Have the feelings you experienced while playing it changed over the years? McCartney, strangely it hasn't changed that much. I always expect to reach a point where I'm really jaded and I think, not again. But as I started up, I'm reviewing this young guy's work and maybe a line or a phrase will strike me and I'll think, wow, this kid is good. Fred's interpretation. The classics are the classics. And the reason they endure is that they're simply great songs. It's like the emotional benefits that radio brings to its audience, especially with like a classic hits radio station or a classic rock station. Those iconic Beatles songs create feelings and experiences in much the same way as an on-air personality provides companionship on the drive to work, or mood elevation when a listener truly needs it. Understanding how those emotional connections are made is part of what makes a great concert and a great radio station. Now, McCartney may not think of himself as a programmer per se, but his intrinsic understanding of the craft of entertaining millions of fans and followers is one of the reasons why he's endured. He unknowingly just gave all radio PDs a gift. The point of view from someone who truly gets it, what it means to connect, entertain, and serve his community. And the rest of the article is there, if you want to, hit the link and go to the New York Times, which actually you can't see unless you have a subscription, which I don't have. Pretty interesting, right? How the parallels between doing a concert with McCartney and doing a radio station, how close they are. And, it's great that Fred did this blog. If you want to see more of Fred's blog, there's a link just below here, not only underneath, but also obviously on the screen as you can see. And, I suggest that you kind of read Fred's blogs, as much as you can if you're trying to learn about programming, because they're really good. And Fred really knows what he's talking about. He's one of those few people that in radio, like I respect highly, because, he's done so much and he just knows so much stuff now, and it's good and that he's passing it along to all of us, which is great. You can always learn something. So hopefully you like this, and if you did, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, notifications, all the usual stuff for YouTube. Until the next lesson, see ya!